The coffee shop on 5th Street. Natalie Rivers checked her phone for the third time in 5 minutes. The coffee shop was warm and crowded, filled with the afternoon buzz of conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine. She sat near the window, watching people pass by on the sidewalk outside, each one wrapped in expensive coats and designer scarves that screamed success and status. She pulled her own tailored blazer a little tighter, feeling the quality fabric beneath her fingers. It had cost her 2 weeks of salary, but it was worth it. In her line of work as an event coordinator for high-profile clients, appearances mattered. Everything mattered. The way you dressed, the way you spoke, the car you drove, even the coffee shop you chose for a blind date. Her sister Emma had insisted on setting up this meeting. "He's perfect for you," Emma had said over the phone last week. "Kind, intelligent, stable. Just give him one chance." Natalie had resisted at first. Her last relationship had ended badly 6 months ago when her boyfriend, a lawyer at a prestigious firm, had left her for someone with better connections. The breakup had taught her a harsh lesson about the world she lived in. People judged. People measured. People always wanted more than what you were. Since then, she had built walls. Careful walls made of logic and self-protection. She would not be hurt again. She would not let anyone close unless they met her standards. And those standards were high. The door chimed, and a man walked in. Natalie glanced up, then quickly looked away. He wore faded jeans, worn sneakers, and an old brown jacket that looked like it had survived several winters. His hair was slightly messy, as if he had just rolled out of bed. He carried no briefcase. No expensive watch glinted on his wrist. No polished leather shoes clicked against the floor. Please don't let that be him, Natalie thought. The man looked around the cafe, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes, and walked toward her table. "Natalie?" he asked, his voice quiet but pleasant. She forced a smile. "Yes, Daniel. That's me." He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down with an easy comfort that surprised her. "Thanks for agreeing to meet. Emma talks about you all the time." Natalie nodded, already calculating how quickly she could end this meeting. 30 minutes, she decided. She would give him 30 polite minutes, and then she would make an excuse about work and leave. No hard feelings, just incompatible. So, she began trying to sound interested. "What do you do for work?" Daniel leaned back in his chair. "I work with people mostly. Problem solving, planning, building things that help communities function better. Nothing glamorous. Nothing glamorous." That was putting it mildly. Natalie imagined some sort of nonprofit position or maybe community organizing. Noble, sure, but not exactly what she had envisioned for a future partner. She needed someone ambitious, someone driven, someone who understood the world of success and achievement. "That sounds nice," she said, the words feeling hollow even as she spoke them. The waitress came by, and Daniel ordered black coffee. Just black coffee. No fancy latte, no artisan brew, just plain coffee. Natalie ordered her usual cappuccino with almond milk and watched as Daniel thanked the waitress with such genuine warmth that the tired-looking woman actually smiled. "Emma mentioned you coordinate events," Daniel said, turning his attention back to her. "That must be interesting work." "It is," Natalie replied, feeling herself relax slightly into familiar territory. "I work with corporate clients mostly. Product launches, charity galas, executive retreats. It requires a lot of attention to detail and people management." "You bet." Daniel's eyes were focused entirely on her, as if she was the only person in the crowded cafe. "What drew you to that field?" The question surprised her. Most people asked about the glamorous aspects, the celebrities she might have met, the exclusive events she attended. But Daniel seemed genuinely curious about her motivations. "I like creating moments," she found herself saying. "Taking someone's vision and making it real. Watching people experience something beautiful that I helped build. There's satisfaction in that." Daniel nodded slowly. "Creating something meaningful. I understand that completely." They talked for longer than Natalie had planned. Daniel asked questions that made her think, questions about her childhood dreams, her favorite memories, the moment she knew she wanted to work with events. He listened without interrupting, without checking his phone, without that glazed look people got when they were just waiting for their turn to talk. And surprisingly, he was funny, not in a loud or showy way, but with a quiet humor that caught her off guard. When he told a story about accidentally ordering 50 pizzas instead of 15 for a community gathering, Natalie laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep she had forgotten existed. But then her eyes would drift to his worn jacket, his scuffed shoes, and doubt would creep back in. This was pleasant, yes, but was it enough? Could she build a future with someone who seemed so unbothered by appearances, so unconcerned with climbing higher? When they finally stood to leave, Daniel smiled at her again. I really enjoyed this, Natalie. Would you maybe want to do this again sometime? She hesitated. Every logical part of her brain screamed no. But something else, something quieter and more honest, whispered yes. Maybe, she heard herself say. Let me think about it. Daniel's smile didn't falter. Fair enough. Take care, Natalie. He walked out into the cold afternoon, hands in his pockets, looking like just another person in the crowd. Natalie watched him go, feeling confused and frustrated with herself. Why did she feel disappointed watching him leave? Why did part of her already want to see him again? She shook her head, gathering her things. It was just loneliness, she told herself. Nothing more. But that night, lying in bed, she kept thinking about the way Daniel had listened. Really listened. As if her words mattered more than her appearance, her job title, or her connections. It was strange, and unsettling, and somehow wonderful. The second chance. 3 days passed before Natalie texted Daniel. She had written and deleted the message at least a dozen times, each version sounding either too eager or too cold. Finally, she settled on something simple. Coffee again? Same place, Saturday afternoon? His reply came within minutes. I'd like that. See you at 2. Saturday arrived with unexpected sunshine, rare for late December. Natalie dressed more casually this time, jeans and a nice sweater, though she still made sure everything looked put together. She told herself it was just coffee, just a conversation, nothing serious. Daniel was already there when she arrived, sitting at the same table by the window. This time he wore a simple navy sweater and khaki pants. Still nothing expensive, still nothing that screamed success, but he looked clean and comfortable. Snowy, a cream-colored dog she hadn't noticed last time, lay quietly at his feet. You brought a dog to a coffee shop? Natalie asked, raising an eyebrow as she sat down. Snowy goes everywhere with me, Daniel said, scratching behind the dog's ears. Found him outside a shelter 2 years ago. He was scared of everything. Now he's scared of nothing except vacuum cleaners. Natalie smiled despite herself. Does the cafe allow dogs? The owner's daughter has severe anxiety. Snowy's trained as a therapy dog. He comes here twice a week to visit her. Daniel's voice was matter-of-fact, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Something shifted in Natalie's chest. She looked down at Snowy, who gazed back at her with calm, gentle eyes. That's actually really kind. Animals are easy, Daniel said. They don't judge you based on what you wear or what you own. They just care if you're decent. The words hung in the air between them. Natalie felt her cheeks warm, wondering if he somehow knew about her initial judgments. But Daniel's expression remained open and friendly, no accusation in his eyes. They ordered drinks, and this time the conversation flowed even easier. Daniel asked about her week, and Natalie found herself complaining about a difficult client who kept changing their event requirements at the last minute. Sounds frustrating, Daniel said. What do you do when that happens? Adapt. Smile. Pretend it's no problem, even when I want to scream. Natalie laughed, but there was an edge to it. That's the job. The client is always right, even when they're completely wrong. Must be exhausting, always performing. Natalie paused, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. No one had ever put it quite that way before. Yes, she admitted quietly. It is. Daniel nodded, understanding clear in his expression. I used to do that too. Spent years trying to be what everyone expected. Wore the right clothes, said the right things, went to the right places. It was like living inside a costume. What changed? Natalie asked, genuinely curious now. I realized I was building a life that looked good from the outside, but felt empty on the inside. So I started over. Simplified everything. Focus on what actually mattered to me. And what matters to you? Daniel thought for a moment, his fingers absently stroking Snowy's head. Making things better, not in some grand, save the world way. Just small improvements. Helping people who need it. Building things that last. Spending time with people who see past the surface. Natalie felt something crack inside her carefully constructed walls. This man, sitting across from her in his modest clothes and worn shoes, seemed more content than anyone she knew in her circle of successful, ambitious professionals. "Tell me about your work," she said. "The real details, not just the summary." Daniel's face lit up. He told her about a community center he'd helped establish in a struggling neighborhood, about youth programs that kept kids off the streets, about a small business incubator that had launched 30 local startups. He spoke with passion but without ego, describing challenges and failures as openly as successes. "We just finished renovating an old warehouse into affordable workspace for artists and craftspeople," he said. "Watching people create things, watching their businesses grow, that's better than any paycheck." "That sounds amazing," Natalie said, and meant it. "But doesn't it bother you? Not having more for yourself?" Daniel tilted his head, considering. "What would more look like? A bigger apartment I'm never home in? A fancy car to sit in traffic? Expensive clothes to impress people I don't care about?" He smiled gently. "I have enough. More than enough, actually." The words challenged everything Natalie had built her life around. She had always believed that more was better, that success meant climbing higher, earning more, owning better things. But sitting here with Daniel, watching the way he interacted with the world around him, she started to question those beliefs. When an elderly man dropped his wallet near their table, Daniel immediately bent to retrieve it, helping the man back to his feet with patient kindness. When the barista accidentally spilled water on their table, he reassured her with such genuine warmth that her embarrassed tears turned into a grateful smile. These small moments revealed something Natalie had rarely seen in her professional world: authentic goodness without any ulterior motive. "Can I show you something?" Daniel asked as they prepared to leave. "It's a short walk from here." Natalie hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." They walked through the downtown streets, Snowy trotting happily between them. Daniel pointed out small details she had never noticed before. A community garden tucked between buildings, a little free library built into an old phone booth, murals painted by local students on brick walls. "You see the city differently," Natalie observed. "I see the people who make it beautiful," Daniel replied. "The ones doing good work that nobody notices or celebrates. They're everywhere once you start looking." They stopped in front of a renovated building with large windows. Inside, Natalie could see people working at various stations. Someone throwing pottery, another person bent over a sewing machine, someone else assembling what looked like wooden furniture. "This is the warehouse I mentioned," Daniel said. "Want to look inside?" They entered, and immediately Natalie felt the energy of creative work in progress. A young woman approached, her face breaking into a huge smile when she saw Daniel. "Daniel, perfect timing. Mrs. Chun just finished her first collection of scarves. They're beautiful." They followed her to a corner where an older woman was carefully arranging hand-woven scarves on a display. Her face glowed with pride. "Daniel, look what I made," Mrs. Chun said, her accent thick but her joy unmistakable. "6 months ago, I had nothing. You give me chance, give me space, give me hope. Now I have business." Daniel's smile was genuine and humble. "You did the hard work, Mrs. Chun. I just provided the room." But Mrs. Chun shook her head firmly. "No, no. You provide more than room. You provide belief. That's worth everything." As they left the building, Natalie was quiet. She was beginning to understand that Daniel's modest appearance had nothing to do with lack of success or ambition. It was a choice, a deliberate decision to invest his resources in things that mattered to him rather than things that would impress others. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. Daniel glanced at her. "Is that good or bad?" "I don't know yet," Natalie admitted. "But it's making me think about a lot of things I thought I knew for certain." They walked back toward the coffee shop where Natalie had parked her car. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Natalie, Daniel said as they reached her car. I know I don't fit the usual picture of what successful looks like. I don't have the expensive clothes or the flashy lifestyle. But I want you to know that I'm not aimless or unmotivated. I'm very deliberate about the life I've built. It just doesn't look like what most people expect. Natalie met his eyes and saw no defensiveness there, just honest vulnerability. I'm starting to see that, she said softly. Would you want to see me again? He asked. This time, Natalie didn't hesitate. Yes, I would. Daniel's smile was worth more than any expensive gift. Good, because I really enjoy spending time with you. As Natalie drove home, she felt confused and exhilarated and uncertain all at once. Everything she thought she knew about success, about worth, about what made someone valuable was being challenged. And surprisingly, she didn't mind. That night, she looked at her own apartment with new eyes. Expensive furniture, designer decorations, everything carefully curated to impress visitors. But when had she last felt truly comfortable here? When had this place felt like home rather than a showroom? She picked up her phone and texted Emma. You were right about Daniel. He's different, really different. Emma's response came quickly. Different good or different bad? Natalie thought for a long moment before typing her reply. Different honest. And I think I needed that. The unraveling. 2 weeks passed in a blur of coffee dates, long walks, and conversations that stretched late into the evening. Natalie found herself thinking about Daniel at odd moments. During client meetings, while coordinating vendor schedules, in the quiet of her apartment at night. He had become a constant, gentle presence in her thoughts. They were careful with each other, both sensing that something real and fragile was growing between them. Daniel never pushed for more than she was ready to give. Natalie tried to ignore the small voice in her head that still worried about practical things like financial stability and long-term security. On a Friday afternoon, Natalie had a meeting with a potential new client at an upscale hotel downtown. The company was launching a tech product and wanted a lavish event to celebrate. She arrived early, portfolio in hand, dressed in her most professional attire. The hotel lobby was stunning. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and sleek modern furniture that probably cost more than her car. She was checking her phone when she heard a familiar voice. Mr. Brooks, the conference room is ready whenever you are. The board members are already waiting. Natalie looked up. Daniel stood near the elevator, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that fit him like it had been custom-made. His hair was neatly styled, and he wore a watch that she recognized as the kind that cost more than some people's annual salary. He was speaking with a hotel manager who was treating him with obvious deference. For a moment, Natalie thought she was seeing things. This couldn't be the same man who wore faded jeans and old jackets, who volunteered at community centers, who seemed so deliberately modest. Daniel's eyes met hers across the lobby. His expression shifted from surprise to something that looked almost like resignation, as if he had known this moment would come eventually. He excused himself from the hotel manager and walked toward her. Each step seemed to widen the distance that had somehow appeared between them. Natalie, he said quietly, what are you doing here? I have a client meeting, she managed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. What are you doing here? Daniel glanced back at the elevator, then at her. Can we talk? After your meeting? Who are you? The question came out sharper than she intended. I'm the same person I've always been, Daniel said. But I think we need to have a conversation. A real one. Natalie's client meeting was a disaster. She couldn't focus, couldn't engage, couldn't summon her usual charm and professionalism. The potential client clearly noticed, and after 30 awkward minutes, they thanked her politely and said they would be in touch. She knew they wouldn't be. Daniel was waiting in the hotel's quiet library lounge, back in his casual clothes. He must have changed quickly after his meeting. Snowy lay at his feet, and the dog's tail wagged slightly when Natalie approached. Sit, please, Daniel said. Natalie sat, her hands clenched in her lap. Explain. Daniel took a breath. My full name is Daniel Brooks. I'm the founder and CEO of Brooks Community Development. We're a private investment firm that specializes in urban renewal, affordable housing, and small business incubation. The company is worth about $8 million. The words hung in the air like smoke. Natalie felt dizzy. 8 million, she repeated. Give or take, Daniel said. It's hard to calculate exactly because most of our assets are reinvested in projects rather than sitting in accounts. Why? Natalie's voice cracked. Why did you let me think you were just some modest volunteer? Why did you dress like that? Act like that? Because that's who I am, Daniel said firmly. The clothes I wear on weekends are the clothes I'm comfortable in. The work I do at community centers is the work that matters to me. The business, the money, those are tools. They're not my identity. But you lied. I never lied. Daniel's voice was gentle but steady. I told you I work with people, that I do problem solving and planning, that I help communities function better. All of that is true. I just didn't specify the scale. Natalie stood up, pacing. You let me judge you. You watched me look at your clothes and your worn shoes and make assumptions, and you said nothing. Would it have changed anything if I told you on the first date that I was wealthy? Daniel asked. Would you have gotten to know the real me? Or would you have seen dollar signs and opportunity? The question hit like a physical blow. Because Natalie knew the answer. If she had known from the start, she would have approached everything differently. She would have been more eager, more accommodating, more calculated. She wouldn't have been real. That's not fair, she whispered. Maybe not, Daniel agreed. But it's honest. Natalie, do you know how many people have tried to date me because of my money? How many friendships turned out to be networking opportunities in disguise? How many times I've wondered if people actually like me or just what I can do for them? So, this was a test. I was supposed to prove I was different. No, Daniel stood, moving closer but not touching her. It wasn't a test. I just wanted someone to see me as a person first. Everything else second. And you did. When you agreed to a second date, despite thinking I had no money, despite all your doubts about my modest lifestyle, you chose to see past the surface. That meant everything to me. Natalie felt tears burning behind her eyes. I don't know what to feel right now. Embarrassed? Angry? Confused? All of it. All of it is fair, Daniel said softly. They sat in silence for several long minutes. Natalie's mind was spinning, replaying every conversation, every moment, seeing them all through this new lens. The warehouse, she said suddenly. Mrs. Chun, the community center. You don't just help with those projects. You fund them. Yes. And the therapy dog program? I started it 5 years ago after my sister struggled with anxiety. Trained Snowy myself. More pieces fell into place. The way people responded to him, the respect in their voices, the hotel manager's deference. She had seen it all, but interpreted it as simple kindness rather than recognition of status. I feel like an idiot, Natalie said. You're not an idiot. You're someone who made assumptions based on incomplete information. We all do that. Daniel hesitated, then continued. I know this changes things. I know you probably need time to process. But I need you to know something. The man you've been spending time with these past few weeks, that's the real me. The suits and the board meetings, those are necessary parts of my work, but they're not who I am at my core. Natalie looked at him, really looked at him. Same gentle eyes, same patient expression, same quiet strength. He hadn't changed. Only her perception had. Why community development? She asked. Why not tech or finance or something more glamorous? Daniel smiled slightly. Because I grew up in a neighborhood that desperately needed investment and never got it. I watched good people struggle not because they weren't talented or hardworking, but because they never got a fair chance. When I had the opportunity to make money, I decided to use it to give others the chances I never had growing up. That's why you live simply. You're putting everything back into the work. Mostly, I have enough for myself. I own a small house, nothing fancy. I drive a reliable car. I don't need more than that. He paused. Does this change how you feel about me? Natalie closed her eyes. I don't know. I need time to think. Take all the time you need, Daniel said. I'm not going anywhere. She left the hotel in a daze, driving home on autopilot. Her apartment felt stifling when she entered, all her expensive possessions suddenly seeming hollow and meaningless. That night, she called Emma. He's rich, Natalie blurted out as soon as her sister answered. Daniel, he runs an $8 million company. There was a pause. I know. You know. Of course I know. His company renovated the building where I work. He's kind of famous in community development circles. Emma's voice was gentle. I thought you knew, or at least that you'd figure out. Why didn't you tell me? Because you needed to meet him as a person, not as a bank account. And you did. So what's the problem? Natalie sat on her expensive couch in her carefully decorated apartment. The problem is that I judged him. I looked at his old jacket and his worn shoes, and I thought he wasn't enough. And all along, he had more than enough. He just chose not to show it. So he's humble and generous and deliberately modest, Emma said. Those are good things, Nat. I know, but it makes me feel shallow. Like everything I value is wrong. Or maybe, Emma suggested carefully, it's showing you that there are different ways to measure worth, different definitions of success. And maybe that's not a bad thing to learn. After they hung up, Natalie stood by her window, looking out at the city lights. She thought about Daniel and his community center, surrounded by people whose lives he had quietly improved. She thought about Mrs. Chen's scarves, about the therapy dog program, about all the small, meaningful ways he used his resources to make the world better. And she thought about herself, about the expensive clothes and carefully curated image, about the constant performance and the exhausting need to impress. Who was really richer? The man who had millions but chose simplicity and service? Or the woman who had comfort but constantly craved more? The next morning, Natalie texted Daniel. Can we meet? I've done some thinking. They met at the coffee shop where it had all begun. Daniel was there first, wearing his usual casual clothes, Snowy resting peacefully at his feet. I'm sorry, Natalie said as she sat down, for judging you, for making assumptions, for caring too much about things that don't actually matter. You don't need to apologize for being human, Daniel replied. Yes, I do, because you were right. If I had known from the start, I would have acted differently. I would have been performing, try to impress you, calculating whether you were a good investment. And that's awful. But you didn't do that. You saw past all the surface stuff and connected with who I actually am. That's what matters. Natalie took a shaky breath. These past few weeks with you have made me question everything about my life. The way I dress, the things I buy, the goals I chase. You made me wonder if I've been climbing the wrong ladder all along. I didn't mean to make you question yourself. Maybe I needed to. Maybe I've been so focused on looking successful that I forgot to actually be happy. She looked at him directly. You're different from anyone I've ever known. Not because you're wealthy, but because you're genuine. You use your resources to help others instead of to elevate yourself. That's rare. That's special. Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand gently. So, where does that leave us? I want to keep seeing you, Natalie said. Not because of your company or your money. I want to keep seeing you because you make me want to be better, more thoughtful, more purposeful, less obsessed with appearances and more focused on substance. That goes both ways, Daniel said. You challenge me too. You remind me that ambition isn't a bad thing, that wanting nice things doesn't make you shallow, that caring about your career is valid. We balance each other. They sat together as the morning light streamed through the windows, hands clasped across the table. Around them, the coffee shop buzzed with activity, but they existed in their own quiet bubble of understanding. No more secrets? Natalie asked. No more secrets, Daniel promised. Though I should probably mention that I have a board meeting next Tuesday where I'll have to wear a suit again. Fair warning. Natalie laughed, really laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. I think I can handle that, as long as you still show up in your old jacket on weekends. Deal. They left together, walking out into the crisp morning air. Snowy trotted between them, tail wagging happily. Natalie realized that nothing had actually changed except her perception. Daniel was still the same kind, thoughtful person he had always been. She was the one who had grown, who had learned to see value in places she had never thought to look before. Thank you, she said as they reached her car. For what? For letting me judge you by your clothes and still giving me a chance to see beyond them. Daniel smiled. Thank you for looking deeper. Not everyone does. As Natalie drove home, she made a decision. She would donate half of her expensive wardrobe to charity. She would stop obsessing over impressing clients and focus more on serving them well. She would visit Daniel's community center and see if there were ways her event planning skills could help with her programs. She wouldn't become a different person, but she would become a better version of herself. One who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in designer clothes or luxury apartments, but in meaningful work, genuine connections, and the positive impact you left on the world around you. And she would do it all alongside a man who had taught her that lesson without ever saying a word, simply by living it every single day. The blind date that had started with judgment and assumption had transformed into something real and valuable. Not because Daniel ran a $1 million empire, but because beneath the worn jacket and modest appearance, he had a heart worth more than any fortune. And Natalie, finally, had learned to recognize true value when she saw it. The end.